So, as you know, Audentes, we focus on rare disease and we use AAV gene therapy technology. We actually have 4 programs in development, and I'm going to touch on all of those. And it's actually very important because we have different programs and we can learn one from the other. So we have 2 neuromuscular programs, we have a liver program, and we have a cardiac program. But it's actually very helpful to be able to learn from one program to the other. We have a large manufacturing facility, which is a huge advantage. Up until recently, we were the only gene therapy company in the US to have its own clinical GMP. GMP stands for Good Manufacturing Practice, which means it's able to produce enough drug of high enough quality to put into patients. Up until recently, we were the only gene therapy company to have that facility in-house. We have a dedicated team, and we're due to start clinical trials for 2 of our programs, MTM being the first, within a couple of months. We anticipate dosing the first child within the next couple of months, and we anticipate being able to share data on the first few children in the clinical trial probably early in the new year. So, our MTM program and our curriculum in the jar program, and I'll touch on this in a second, they're kind of going neck and neck. MTM's going a little bit ahead of curriculum in the jar. We also have a program in Pompe disease. That's a program that will probably start clinical trials towards the end of next year. And we also have a cardiac program, CAS-Q2 CPVT, and that's likely to start clinical trials during the middle of next year. So since we last met, our teams have been very busy. This looks over 2015 to now. So we started, if you look at the left-hand side of the graph, we started our Inceptus study. Inceptus, another Latin word, it means to begin. And this was the first trial we started for any of our programs. And we enrolled 16 children with myotubular myopathy over a period of several months to observe their natural history on an ongoing basis. And the expectation is that these children, after being observed for a period of a year, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, will then roll over into the interventional study. This is the study that will be with gene therapy drug. And that study is called Aspiro, once again another Latin word, to aspire to. And as I say, that's due to start within the next couple of months. During that time, we opened up our manufacturing facility. During that time, we did several financings and culminating in Audentes becoming a public company. So we're on a very sound, secure financial footing to take all the programs forward. We filed the IND, this is the investigational new drug application, with the FDA at the end of February. It's 7,000 pages of science and documents, which is split into 3 big areas. One area is the manufacturing piece, i.e. the quality of the drug and how we manufacture it, the process. One chunk of it is the non-clinical data. So this is an overview of all the studies that Anna Bush-Bella has done in the mouse, all the dog data that Casey and David have performed, and then additional studies that we've performed with our own product manufactured in-house. That's the next big third of the IND. And then the final third of the IND is really our plans around the clinical development, what we're going to assess, what we're going to measure, how we're going to do it in the clinical trial. So 7,000 pages. We submitted that at the end of February. We had a couple of questions from the FDA, but we've been speaking to the FDA on an ongoing basis for the past 2 or 3 years, so we didn't anticipate there being too much problem. And they didn't have any questions. Well, they had a couple of questions for us, but they were resolved, and the IND cleared at the end of March, which means we were then given permission to start dosing children with the gene therapy product when we're able to get the sites up and running. So that was a big success from our perspective. We had an investigator meeting for the Aspiro study about 3 or 4 weeks ago in Orlando. So Barry was there in attendance, Mike, several others. Jim was also there, I see. Where we spent 2 full days talking about how we're going to operationalize the clinical trial, how we're going to measure the endpoints in the clinical study, how we handle any ethical issues that crop up, how do we measure the respiratory outcomes? How do we measure the neuromuscular outcomes? How do we get drug from the manufacturing facility through to the clinical trial sites where the drug gets stored? How do we manage import-export licenses through Europe, etc.? So we spent 2 full days talking about that, and as I say, due to start the clinical trial in the next couple of months. We've also set up an external data monitoring committee. Now what this is, it's a group of experts, so neuromuscular experts, immunologists, metabolic geneticists who give independent oversight to the clinical development program. So in addition to the principal investigators who are running the studies at the sites, we have an external group of experts who will be looking at things big picture wise and guiding us, advising us, giving us recommendations, almost as an ombudsman, just really overseeing, making sure we're doing everything and not forgetting anything along the way. That was set up. We had our kickoff meeting for that a few weeks ago also. So lots has been happening. In conjunction with our collaborators, we're also making many scientific contributions to the field. We worked with Mike and others on talking about translational pathology, so comparing the pathology of the MTM mouse with the dog, with the zebrafish, with the human, and we're actually working on a second paper on that. This was more of a descriptive paper. We're working on more a quantitative paper, a statistical paper, which hopefully will be submitted shortly. And on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see the poster that was presented of the recensus data. So Alan mentioned earlier, Alan's taking the lead on this as the principal investigator for the study, but we've collated about 120 case records into the recensus database. Many of you have contributed the notes from your children into this study, and we're able to start looking at the data and making contributions to the field and contributions to the knowledge of myotubule myopathy. So the poster was presented at the MDA meeting. We've submitted the actual formal paper from this study, and we recently got some comments back from the journal which we're addressing. So I anticipate that hopefully we'll see the formal paper in the public domain towards the end of the year. And we're also working on the second paper from this database also. So I think there'll be a series of publications and a series of contributions to the knowledge of MTM based on this recensus database. Okay, so to really centralize and think about the program as a whole, there's so many different things happening, and it's a complex program. But what I wanted to reiterate is what our overall goal is as Audentes, and it's quite clearly written here. The overall goal of the program is to ensure that we obtain global approval after investigational clinical trials so that all children and families with MTM may benefit as rapidly as possible. That's our mantra, that's our goal at Audentes. And there's 3 key words in this statement. The first key word is the word global. We want everybody with MTM all over the world to be able to benefit from this gene therapy product, if indeed it is successful and it shows safety and effectiveness. So global is the first key word. The second key word is the word all. We want all children and families affected by MTM to be able to benefit from this gene therapy product. And the third key word is rapidly. We want to make this happen as quickly as possible. Okay? And we do this, we achieve this goal by running a thoughtfully designed, robust, and well-executed clinical trial program that evaluates the safety and effectiveness of the investigational product AT132. So we've given the name of this product, it's called AT132. All of our products have a 3-digit number ascribed to them, and 132 is the name that's been given to the gene therapy product for myotubule myopathy. And there's a couple of keywords in this statement. The first keyword is the word investigational, and I think it's important to understand that we've shown that the gene therapy product works in mice. We've shown that it works in dogs. We don't know yet that it's going to work in humans. We certainly hope it's going to work in humans, and indications so far are that it may well do so, but we don't know as yet. It's not a treatment yet. We have to test it in children and families before we know for definite that it is a treatment. So the word investigational is actually critical here. I think the other phrase that's important is thoughtfully designed, robust, and well executed. We've given a lot of thought into how this clinical trial is to be designed. We want it to be a robust study, and we want it to be executed well. So Sal's going to talk a little bit about the design and the thinking that's gone into this. And as I say, Sean is heavily involved in the operations and making sure it's a well-executed study. Now, we're standing up here. We want to be open with you as much as possible, but I wanted to put this slide up because it's important. Now that we're a public company, we have to be a little careful about what we say. You know, we're required to comply with governmental agencies' rules, in particular the FDA, but also the Securities and Exchange Commission. So we can't actually disclose material, non-public information. What that means is that if we start to see some preliminary positive benefit from the first 1 or 2 children in the clinical trial, we can't share that with you before we share it with the wider community. I can't even pick up the phone to somebody like Casey and say, hey, Casey, we've started to see some positive benefits. That would get us as a company into trouble, and it would get Casey into trouble as someone receiving that information. So our commitment to you is that we'll be as open as we can be, but we may not be able to be as open as you might like us to be. Now, I think what's likely going to happen is that once we dose the first child with MTM, it's more than likely that we will announce that to the world, just so you know the study has started. And as I say, we anticipate in the next couple of months. And then I think the next time you'll receive information will be at the beginning of January, because we've made a commitment to look at the first few children who we dose and then share that. We'll analyze the data at the end of the year and then share that with the wider community early in January. But until then, once the study is started, we won't be able to share any information on the project as a whole. And it comes down, once again, to the initial statement. We want to get this drug approved as quickly as possible and run the study in as robust a way as possible. And if information leaks out about the study over time, it does actually damage the integrity of the study. A couple of other things. Clinical trials are experiments. Participants are subjects, not patients. And the key person in running clinical studies from the patient's perspective is actually the principal investigator at the site. Okay, so if you're in the study, if you're in the study at the University of Florida, your key go-to person is Barry Byrne. If you're in the clinical study in Toronto, your key person is Jim Dowling. We as the sponsor company have to take a step back because that physician-patient relationship is sacred, and I wanted to re-emphasize that once again. So if you're involved in the study, if you have any concerns, it's best to bring it up with the team at your center. I think the other important point I want to make is if you're involved in the clinical study, or even if you hear anything about a child in the clinical study, we have to be once again be very careful about how data gets shared. And in the world of social media now with Facebook and Twitter, it's very likely, or there's a real risk of information getting shared prematurely before we've had a chance to look at it properly and assess it and then share it appropriately in the public environment and with the regulators. So I'd ask you, if you're involved in the clinical study, if you hear anything about a patient in the clinical study, not to share that information prematurely with a post on Facebook or a post on a Twitter feed. Any of that incremental information leaking out has a risk of damaging the integrity and the robustness of the clinical trial. So that's a request we're making to you to help us run the study in the most disciplined way.